Now, Sports Talk with Broads. Here's Hunter Brody.
Can you say 4 straight victories? 4 straight victories for this Philadelphia Flyers squad. They beat the San Jose Sharks 4-2. It was a one-line show. Kevin Hayes, Scott Laughton, and Travis Konecny, oh, did they dominate this hockey game. I mean, they were everywhere. They were creating opportunities. They were keeping the puck in zone for scoring chances. They were hitting the pipe. They were cashing in. They were, moving the puck beautifully. I mean, tic-tac-toe behind the netminder. It was great. Martin Jones not in between the pipes for the Sharks. Not that it matters. They are having a horrendous season as it is. Poor Joe Thornton, and we will get to that because he did not get traded at the trade deadline, and I guess this is almost the perfect segue to get into the trade deadline before we dissect the win, because I did not get an opportunity yet to talk about how I feel about the moves that Chuck Fletcher made. And to be honest with you, I labeled it tremendous, and I got some backlash because people were questioning how I could possibly say tremendous. Well, when I say that word, I'm not claiming this was as good as, let's put it in comparison to last season, going out and getting Matt Duchene at the deadline. This isn't tremendous by saying they went out and got a huge game-changing top 6 forward or a top 4 defenseman. But for what the Flyers had available when it comes to cap space, for them to acquire someone like Derek Grant, who did not play particularly well in the game against the Sharks, but he just got into town. He had one skate, and hey, here you go. So it's going to take time to adjust and figure things out. But to go out and get someone like Derek Grant, who has 14 goals on the season, for your bottom 6 role, that is awesome. And then on top of that, you go out and get a veteran 4th-line player, Nate Thompson, who has been there before. You can compare him to a style of play. Let's go with Michael Raffle, to the point where he's experienced. You can trust him in certain situations. He can do very well on the PK. Like, you go out and get those 2 type of players with that type of cap. I didn't expect them to barely do anything. So I say tremendous, because for what they actually had in terms of being able to bring players in without sending anyone out, it's great. I mean, they gave up these low round picks that won't hurt them. And one thing I loved was hearing that established players wanted the front office to step up and bring in new faces without letting anybody walk out of the locker room. Because they know that this team is capable of making some noise, that this team is solid and ready to make a run this postseason. And they wanted to bring in help. And that was a big question mark heading into the deadline. Will they be able to? Will they have to give anything up and mess up the flow of the team? Will they have to move someone with a bigger contract to bring anybody back in that was capable of being a difference maker? One of the names was Pajot, but once you saw what Pajot went for, you're laughing. I would never give up that type of package for Pajot, even though keeping him there is something. So all around, when I look at the deadline, I'm pumped. A 14-goal guy this season with that contract? I would have never thought that Chuck Fletcher would bring in someone like that. Once I saw Nate Thompson, which was the first move that was announced, I kind of assumed that was it, and I still would have been okay with that. Flyers Twitter is almost just as toxic as Sixers Twitter. Not to the same level when it comes to amount of people being aggressive and being toxic, but when it comes to what they're saying, it's just as toxic. It was as if fans or Flyers, I wouldn't even say, maybe some people who just watch hockey and aren't Flyers fans, so whether it's Flyers fans or hockey fans as a whole, thinking the Flyers were going to go out and make a move and make a splash to bring in a Sidney Crosby or an Ovechkin. What are you talking about? That was never in the books. That was never possible. Some people also fell for that Yossi troll Twitter account. It actually got a couple radio hosts here in Philadelphia. They were talking about it on their show that the Flyers were going out to trade for Yossi of the Nashville Predators, their stud captain defenseman, who has a cap hit of $9 million. Yeah, that's impossible. Impossible. So anyway, that's my thoughts on the trade deadline. And before we dive into more about this game against the Sharks, I want to let you know that I can give you free money. And if you are buying tickets to go to any game out there, not just the NHL, but the NBA, college basketball, or even a concert, if you use the promo code BROADS at SeatGeek's checkout page, you will get $20 off of your total purchase. And if you think about it, that pays for your parking. So it's a no-brainer to use the promo code BROADS today. So how about the Fly guys hopping on early? They get a power play chance, and knowing how bad their power play is, and knowing how good the Sharks are on the penalty kill, believe it or not, they actually have the best penalty kill in the National Hockey League, which is shocking considering they stink. They're a bad hockey team, and they fell off completely. But yes, they have the best penalty kill in the NHL. And the Flyers, a minute and 30 in, find a way to cash in. JVR gets an assist as he throws it to aube-kubel in the slot. Bang. Flyers up 1-0 early. Okay. And that made me feel good. Flyers are coming out of the gate. First game after the trade deadline. You got some guys in the mix. Oh, real quick. Chuck Fletcher states that Joel Farabee is going to be sent down, and it was his decision. His decision to do it. Now, that tells me him and Alain Vigneault might have seen differently. They might have not seen eye to eye, but Chuck Fletcher put his foot down and said, Joel Farabee is going down. That's how I at least see it. For him to come out and state it was my decision, that tells me he's holding himself accountable for that action. Now, I think that's a slap in the face because Joel Farabee has been playing tremendous, but the way they describe it is he's an offensive guy. He's not a bottom six type of player, and they want him playing in the top six. And with the moves being made and throwing Derek Grant in there and also Nate Thompson, Scott Laughton gets moved to the second line left wing. There was no spot for him to be in the top six. I still think it's a slap in the face, and there's a chance he does get recalled at some point. But I don't know how I feel about it. I'm not going to cry, though. I mean, I understand their logic. It just seems like after everything Joel Farabee has been through this season, it's, it's part of the business, but it's also a little, questionable at the same time. But anyway, diving back to the hockey game. When I saw the Flyers put their foot on the gas so early in the game to score a power play goal, I loved it. But it's funny because the first period sucked for them after that. Sucked. They were sloppy. They did not look engaged. They were getting outworked. I thought they were not winning puck battles. They did not get to the puck first when there was a loose puck involved. So overall, after that first goal, I thought the Flyers somewhat maybe thought they were going to walk all over the Sharks. 5 minutes after the Flyers' goal, Carter Hart allows a far pad play to occur, a bad rebound. It's 1-1, tied. I didn't like the way he handled that. Now, far pad is a good hockey play. You're coming down the wall, you throw it far pad, you have players crash in the net, bing, bang, boom, you find a way to put in the rebound, right? That was my bread and butter. I would do that on a breakaway. I'm on a breakaway, I'm looking far pad. I mean, that's just a simple hockey play. But I think Carter Hart can do a better job there to not allow the rebound to pop right back out to the slot. You got to control that better. So the first period, I thought, after they scored, it didn't look right. And it didn't add up because the way they started the game, because they had their foot on the gas. Second period, though, things changed. And this is when the Flyers line, the one line, took over the game. Scott Laughton has stepped up big time. I am so impressed with Scott Laughton. I remember talking about this in the offseason. We got to get rid of, and it's funny how these two players had great seasons, and sadly, one of them ended short, but I said, we got to get rid of the Scott Laughtons of the world, the Oscar Lindbloms of the world. That's what I stated. And they took huge steps in their career. Once again, sadly, Oscar did not get to play this out because he was on a path to bright things. I mean, really, he was going to have a bright season, and you could see that from the jump, how dialed in he was. And I still can't get over that moment I saw Voracek hug him when he was in the locker room. It melts my heart. But going back to Scott Laughton, he has been awesome, and he's stepped up, and he's playing so many different roles. Center, wing, second line, third line, fourth line, whatever you need him to do. The Scott Kingery of the Philadelphia Flyers. It's wild. So Kevin Hayes scores his 20th of the season when these three guys are just moving the puck at will. I thought it could have been offsides. You actually had the why did I almost just say the Winnipeg Jets? The San Jose Sharks challenged the call because it was close and it did look offsides. I just think the shots and the angles the cameras got did not get a good enough look to call it offsides. It was because they called it onsides on the ice, they did not have enough to overturn it, which is crazy to think because all of the technology these days, there wasn't a good enough shot. I just seemed like maybe it was possible it was offsides, but the Flyers escaped. Although now that I think about it, is it possible the refs actually confirmed that it was onsides? They might even use that word, which means they did see that it was a good goal the whole way. But anyway, first reaction, my initial thought was maybe that was offsides, but the way Scott Laughton moves it to TK, who moves it to Kevin Hayes, who has to catch the puck behind him, but in motion, he does in rhythm, and he scores for the Flyers to take a 2-1 lead. But the Fly guys are not done. TK scores his 22nd of the season with a 2-on-1, Kevin Hayes and him. And come on, the way they're moving the puck, it's amazing. It was as if this line played together for 17 years, and they knew where everyone was going to be at the same time. They knew where everyone was. Their line was just clicking. You know how when twins are thinking the same thing and all that crazy stuff? It was like that, and I just watched Miracle the other day because it was the anniversary of it, and the first thing that came to my mind was the Coneheads. You know, when Herb Brooks is sitting in his office and he goes, I think we're bringing a line of Coneheads. That's what I thought of, because that was the way they were playing. And those three come up in the movie and pass, shoot, and score. Yeah, pass, shoot, and score. I mean, come on! That's what it was! So the Flyers entered the third period up 2 goals, 3-1. What do you know? Kevin Hayes again. Now, this play was all Scott Laughton, and he's not going to get as much credit as maybe TK and Kevin Hayes for finishing it off, but what he did at the blue line to keep the puck in the zone, one hand on his stick, it looked ugly at one point, but he makes up for it, he pokes it, he keeps it in zone, it goes down low, and how about that? I mean, how about that? The little things that don't just pop at people, they're doing it all. They're playing a full game. It's incredible to watch. It's entertaining as hell to watch as they beat the Sharks, and it was a revenge factor. Remember when the Flyers went on that West Coast trip and they were starting games off slow? They got destroyed by bad teams out there, and it looked awful. Well, it was a revenge factor, and I'm sure the Flyers remembered that moment. So once Hayes scored his second of the night, which, oh, by the way, was his third point, and it was Travis Konecny's third point, and it was Scott Laughton's second assist, a couple bad plays occurred. Both were involving Claude Giroux, actually. So the Sharks make it 4-2, and this play was weird. I mean, I've seen Claude Giroux dominate in this league for years and years and years. And when I say dominate, I'm not talking about Ovechkin dominate or Crosby dominate or Wayne Gretzky dominate, but he has produced a lot of points, and he has played at a high level for years and years. He made one of the most boneheaded plays I've ever seen in my life out of him. He's on the half wall in the defensive zone. The puck is bouncing a little bit, but he tries to use his backhand and get it out of the zone. And he muffed it, and it just trickled maybe 2 feet. The Sharks pick it off, one-timer to the right side, and they end up scoring on Carter Hart. It was a blistering shot. Gregor scores. But Gregor and Claude Giroux come up again, because later on, here's Claude Giroux at the blue line, and here's a blindside hit by Gregor. Now, here's the one thing I'll say. Was it head contact? No, it wasn't. Did it look worse than what it really was based off the way Claude Giroux fell and went down to the ice? Yeah, it looked worse. I love the way the team responded, though. I love the way the boys got up and fought for his captain, and Phil Myers ended up taking a penalty as well, so it was 4-on-4 after that. It was a blindside hit, I guess, by the technicality of it, but it wasn't as bad as it looked. But knowing how the NHL is these days, knowing how professional sports are when it comes to head injuries and, things like that. Because I will say from one angle, it did look like he got him with the shoulder to the head, but when you see it broken down, from the other shot, it was more arm. It was almost as if he hit the arm, but it was the awkward way it went for Claude Giroux as he fell to the ice. But those two plays, a little interesting down the stretch. I didn't like Claude Giroux's game. No line really stood out to me too much except that second line and a little bit of the fourth, because when I look at some of the new acquisitions, I think Derek Grant struggled at times. He did not have a smooth game. He took that one penalty at the end of, was it at the end of the first period? Or at the end of the second? End of the first period, I believe. End of the second. One of the two periods, he took a penalty, and then when you look at Nate Thompson, He did his job, and it was noticeable. And you can see what he brings to the table. It was great. No doubt, it was great. So how about poor Joe Thornton? The guy just wants to win a Stanley Cup, and here comes the trade deadline, and he doesn't get moved. Now, I don't know if that's because there wasn't a lot of phone calls being made, because what team is missing a Joe Thornton? You can argue that there's plenty of teams that can use a Joe Thornton that's going to make a run. But the one thing I always talk about, and it does relate to the Flyers even when we talk about this, is the game is young. The game is filled with youth. You have the Penguins going after someone like Marleau, which is interesting because he's an older guy, but the game is filled with youth. It's filled with young guys. It's filled with speed. Joe Thornton, trust me, he had a great career. He's scored a bunch of points, and he's smart, and he does have value. I'm not trying to say he has no value, but what are teams looking for? I think they're looking for more speed, young guys. And when you talk about the playoffs, it comes at a faster rate. And I don't know. I just think maybe that's a reason. Or hell, maybe the Sharks think that this year is a fluke and they're going to try and work with Joe Thornton in the future here to make a push for next season, because they have been a good team. They have been a good franchise when it comes to success over the last bunch of years. This is a very awkward season, a very downward season, if you will, and you're just not used to seeing them be this pathetic and this ugly. For the Flyers to be on their 4-game win streak, you now have the Sharks on a brutal losing streak on the opposite side. So I don't know. I don't know their thought process with Joe Thornton. I'm sure they had a conversation about it. He's a respected veteran. Like, yo, Joe, what do you think? And do you want to get moved? Do you not want to get moved? I mean, you would have to think that conversation happened. How about this name I barely brought up so far? Carter Hart makes 26 saves on 28 shots. Not tested too much. I did not like the first goal he gave up, but it wasn't the end of the world either. Continues to be hot at home. Only allowed 2 goals, and he did his job, and he looked comfortable. So for that, I tip my cap to Carter Hart. I tip my cap to Alain Vigneault and this Flyer squad. So I think it is time now to hit the Anytime Hotline. If you are interested in making the post-game podcast or any kind of podcast that I make, you can call 856-442-9805 at any time. It's open 24/7. You can leave a message for the show. So now it is time to start it off.
Who's your daddy? What does the home wrecker do? Well, this was an atypical Flyer game, it seems. First period, not so hot. Second and third, they pick it up, but ultimately it was a one-line beatdown. Hayes, Laughton, and Konecny were the stars tonight. That second goal by Kevin Hayes was pretty incredible. To have the presence of mind to not only get the puck to the net, but in the net, pretty solid. As for the trade, those guys are what I call intangible guys. You know, there's nothing that Nate Thompson hasn't seen in his many years in the National Hockey League. They're both physical. They both play with an edge. They'll both drop the gloves if you need them to. But if Farabee does what he can do, he'll be back up sooner rather than later. So again, another solid 2-point night. Keep picking up the low-hanging fruit, and let's beat the Rangers on Friday.
Absolutely. Now, the Rangers are playing really well right now. They are putting together points, and I don't know if they're a legitimate threat for a playoff spot, but all I know is they are playing really good hockey, and they're actually, from a hockey fan perspective, they're fun as hell to watch. Now, I have NHL Game Center, so I find myself tuning into late-night games, at 10:30 games, 10 o'clock games, even 7 o'clock games when the Flyers don't play. Like, I'm all in around the league, and they are an entertaining team to watch. But dialing into what you said there, yeah, I agree they are intangible guys, and I like what they did. Now, I talked about the Joe Thornton thing when it comes to young guys, age, and speed. Well, when you look at someone like Nate Thompson, he isn't really that. He isn't young. He isn't speed. He's the smart veteran player. So that's why I kind of related it to that when I was speaking about Joe Thornton, because the Flyers did not make a move that dealt with speed and whatnot. But when it comes to those two guys, I think it was great value for the contracts and for helping this team when it comes to the bottom six. We already talked about how the bottom six was contributing before those acquisitions, and now you even add to that more. Like, these moves will never hurt because of what you gave up, and if it doesn't work as expected, okay, big deal. You have other players available. And speaking of other players, like, how about aube-kubel? The guy has been producing and scoring, and he's scoring power play goals now. It's crazy.
Hey, Broads, I'm calling after that Flyers win against the San Jose Sharks, and boy, I haven't seen the Flyers play shutdown hockey like that in years. It's been at least a decade since I've seen the Flyers been able to, in this stretch of February when the points really need to start being pumped out, they're just getting wins like it's nothing. They're playing with so much confidence. It's unbelievable. The point production is spread out so evenly between the lines. It's such a sight to behold. I'm so pumped for the playoffs. I'm almost speechless.
How about that energy? How about that energy? That's phenomenal. That right there, that made me all queasy. Like, that made me feel great inside, because I've been doing this for how many years now, and I don't think I've ever heard someone that excited about the Flyers. I truly mean that. That call right there, that energy, that puts a smile on my face. The team deserves it. The fan base deserves it, because they're getting rewarded. Like, the team is rewarding this fan base because they are just playing excellent. None of us could have imagined in a million years it would look like this season. Not this season. Maybe at some point. No one would have ever assumed Kevin Hayes would be this much of a contributor. We liked what he brought to the table. We liked the 200-foot game. We liked what he could do on the PK. But this, all of it as a whole, we are shocked, and we should be pleasantly shocked, and I can't wait to see how this bad boy shapes up.
Hey, bros, what's going on? It was a great win by the Flyers today, and get this, the Flyers are 1 point behind the Pittsburgh Penguins. The Flyers are just getting their wins and points when they can get them. It feels good to watch great hockey right now. It just feels really good. But the one thing that's still annoying me, and it's with the fans that go to the game, they still chant EAGLES Eagles. That is really annoying. So I want to hear your thoughts about that. But also, it's a great win by the Flyers regardless, but still, can the fans stop doing that? Thanks for taking the call.
Oh, the EAGLES chant. See, because the Eagles run the town, you're going to get that no matter what. But I do feel like, and this has been a conversation around the city before, the EAGLES Eagles chant is a disrespect thing for wherever you're at. For example, if the Flyers are bad and they have 27 wins to this point, 22 wins to this point, that is when it's acceptable to do an EAGLES Eagles chant. If you're at a Phillies game and they're losing 12-0, they're losing 10-3, and Gabe Kapler's walking out there looking like a doofus, you can easily use the EAGLES Eagles chant. But when a team is playing well, when they are succeeding, it is disrespectful to chant the Eagles, because that's what you use when you are disappointed on what you're seeing or how they're playing or what they're doing. But when they are giving you greatness, when they are giving you the positive stuff, you appreciate that team for what it is. You don't go Eagles on them. The Eagles is a sign of being upset. So I agree. That is annoying. But guess what? You're never going to change it. You're not. You're not going to change it, because people die for the Eagles. They die for the Eagles. They bleed green. And that's just how it is, because the Eagles will always be number one in this city.
Hey, Rhodes. Big fan. I have to say I respect your take on Sidney Crosby as much as I disagree with it. You're bold to be able to maintain that true appreciation of his abilities in a Philadelphia sports area. And as I said before, I massively respect that. Anyway, here's why I called. I want to know what your take is on JVR's future. I grew up loving him as we shared the number 21 before he went to Toronto, and he returned as 25. I've always been a fan of his, although he's had his ups and downs, much like many other players. On the other hand, I think he has been really consistent and surprising in his hands and playmaking abilities recently. Thanks, bros. Let's go Flyers.
Let's go Flyers. Yes, I love Sidney Crosby. He's the greatest player I've ever seen. He's literally one of my idols when it comes to sports. I have a few idols out there when it comes to sports. Not many, but there are a couple that, I really do look at in a different way. Serena Williams, LeBron James. One of them is Sidney Crosby. It's miraculous what he does. But going to the JVR point. JVR, I think what he is for his career moving forward, I think this is what it's going to be. He isn't a flashy goal scorer, but he is a big-time goal scorer. He finds ways to score. He tips pucks in front. He mucks and grinds by the crease. He does those little things, and he's so strong with his stick. Like, that's how he scores his goals. And if he is, like, this is what I think about it. If JVR is your third-line type of guy, with that type of scoring ability, and for him to be a third-line guy, like, that just shows how deep your team is. So if JVR, even though you look at his contract and it might be a little hefty for that role, if that's what he is, if he is your third-line guy, and you can consistently roll your lines because that's the type of player that is playing in your bottom six, well, it's going to be super beneficial. And if he's capable of doing what he has done this year for, say, the next 4 seasons or so, then, yeah, I mean, that's fine. That's successful. At some point, and this is any player, it'll die out by the end. The contract, if it's 7 years long, you get him for 5, and then the last 2, you're going to have to find ways to utilize him in different roles. And once again, that's not just him. That's sports and athletes in general when they get long contracts. If you're going to get this, a third-line type of player, a winger who can score goals, who can be on the power play, then you're going to have a successful JVR, and I'm totally cool with what he has brought to the table this season. There were times last year it was ugly. In the beginning of this year, I thought that there were times where it was ugly. But once he turned it on and played the way that he has been playing as of late and during this run for the Flyers, I'm very satisfied. That's the way to put it. I'm very satisfied with what he brings to the table, and I think he can do this for 3-4 more seasons until maybe you start to see a decline. You already see a different version of JVR that you have in the past, but once again, you relate that to sports. That's how this thing works. As players get older, they move differently. You have a ton of miles on your body. You change your game. You adapt and things like that. So that's my take on JVR. But I do think he brings a lot to the table for this squad. And even in the locker room, there's something to be said about the way this locker room is. And man, I'll tell you what, I am so stoked for Flyers hockey. I've been anticipating the Flyers-Sharks game all day. That doesn't happen. That hasn't happened in years. I was anticipating it, and I can't wait for them to play the Rangers. I can't wait. So with that being said, thank you so much for watching. Hit that thumbs up button and subscribe, and I will see you next time.